I hereby call this December 14th meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Good evening to everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the police, fire, and emergency management departments for the work they do to keep the members of our community safe. Due to the Safe at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. If a committee member at that time will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. The committee members present today, this is our first meeting of the new Public Safety Committee, is going to be our Vice Chair, Mr. John Larson. Also present with us, Councilmember Kevin Monday. Let's give it the respect that it deserves, and then Councilmember Barbara Haynes Burke. Items on the consent agenda are approved with one sweeping motion unless a member of this council or committee wishes an item to be heard for consideration. Members of the committee or council, are there any items that should be heard for consideration from the consent agenda? Councilmember Adams.
Yes, C1.
Item C1, anybody else on the committee has any items that should be pulled? All right, Councilmember Scipio.
I'm hopeful this is right. C3, is that the loading zones?
It is curb loading zones in the East Ward.
Okay. Yes.
So
Thank
we'll
you.
pull item C1 and item C3. I'd entertain a motion to approve the balance.
So moved.
I heard Councilmember Larson. Is there a second?
I'll second Kevin Mundy.
Seconded by Mr. Mundy. All in favor? We'll go down the roll call. Vice Chair Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Mundy,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
and yes from me. So the consent agenda, excluding items C1 and 3, is approved. So we'll move to item C1.
Item C1, resolution awarding purchase order for gunshot detection system.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we started this discussion in finance. I know we wanted to take a little bit more of a deeper dive into the item. So what I'll do is, well, first of all, Councilmember Adams, before we get to presentation, do you want to be heard or should we move straight to the presentation?
Move straight to the presentation, sir.
Mrs. Logan Ford.
Chair Taylor, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee and council. Item C1 with our gunshot detection system, I would ask Chief Miles if she would present to the committee.
Chief Miles, you have the floor, ma'am.
Chairman Taylor, Mayor Pro Tem, and distinguished council members. The future of criminal investigations lie within advanced technology and real-time crime centers. And just as a reminder, the catalyst for both the gun detection system and the real-time crime center is gun violence. Now more than ever, we want to be able to get a better handle on gun violence, particularly that involving youth. And we continue to see incidents take place as a result of gang activity and other conflicts that we see on social media. Regarding the gunshot detection system, right now we know that Wilmington Police Department, Goldsboro, Greenville Police Departments all have gunshot detection systems. And now, as recently as of September 2020, Durham is looking at the gunshot detection system. With the gunshot detection system, we expect community engagement early and often. We know that collaborating with the community is key for enhancing our investigations and reducing gun violence. We still have segments of our community that do not want to communicate with law enforcement, but we continue to strive to build those relationships and engaging community members. We often get calls from citizens regarding gunfire in communities, and we know that some citizens are concerned about the gunfire, so the gunshot detection system would be a strategy to address gunfire in those areas. But also, if you remember, during the early morning hours on May 28, 2020, Jerika McGee's body was found on the side of the road by a citizen on his way to work.
Right.
We know that the night before, several community members heard the gunfire and heard Jerika screaming, but no one bothered to call the police. And we know that had we had a gunshot detection system in place, we would have been immediately dispatched to that particular location, possibly getting her life-saving measures in place and maybe even saving her life. Any questions?
Yeah, Chief Miles, I'm gonna kick it to Mayor Pro Tem in just a second, but can you tell us exactly how the gunshot detection system
you.
works?
The gunshot detection system works on acoustics, and if there's gunshot detections in the area, there are sensors in place that will detect the immediate locations of that gunfire, and that signal is sent to our communication center. And once the communication center receives that information, it will automatically dispatch an officer to that location. On top of that, the officer receives it immediately on their in-car computers. And so if they're in the immediate area, it's just a more timely response to potential victims.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Miles. Mayor Pro Tem Adams, you have the floor.
Yes. Again, I think Chair Taylor, we started discussing this process a few years ago, this technology for the city of Winston-Salem. Again, I know from what you're telling me, Chief Miles, is that we're talking about 3 square miles of an area. So are we saying, and this is why I say we need to make sure we communicate to the public what this is. Are we saying that we're only going to get 3 square miles, which is, like Councilmember Clark said, 2.3% of the coverage of the entire city? Or every time a bullet or gun is shot, we will know about it? That's my first question. My second question is, on page 2 of the CARF, it states that forensic consultation service fee are available upon request and billed separately at $3.50 per hour. Is that cost already built in here, or is that going to be an added cost? And if so, are there other menu items a la carte that we would have to purchase if we wanted to be able to have a very good system? Thank you.
And Chief Miles, if you can speak to the range of the system and then to the pricing of the system.
The grant that we applied for only covers 3 square miles. And so we know that based on the data that we have, the area right now in the area of Cleveland Avenue and 26th Street, that's the prime area where there are higher call volumes of gun violence. There are sensors that are mobile, so to speak. And so should in the next review or evaluation period, we see that calls for services are on further south, we can actually move those sensors. And so we can expand on this system as well. Of course, it will cost additional money, but this will really help give us insight as to what capabilities the system has and how impactful it will be on a community. Secondly, based on the consultation, all of that should be covered in the dollar figure that we were initially given for the cost of the system. I will explore more to see if there are any additional costs, but right now, everything should be covered in the cost of the system and the analysis of the system. We are constantly on a monthly basis, we have a team in place, a committee with members from across the state and Washington, D.C. To talk about the strategies for the gunshot detection system. They will kind of evaluate the success of the system being in place. And so we're moving forward. We feel confident that based on different partners that we have, and we have had brief conversations, that we will get buy-in from some of our law enforcement partners possibly to enhance this system.
Chief Miles. What, Councilmember Chair, I would ask that there's one part about that 350 that Mayor Pro Tem asked, and it's my understanding from our conversations that that would be used in the case that an expert witness was needed from the system to come in and testify as part of a case, but that would typically not be part of an ongoing need that we would have as part of just operating the system. But I would ask that police department staff would verify that, but that's my understanding from when we were initially researching the product.
You are correct, and typically the district attorney's office would cover that cost for expert witness testimony.
Have your questions been satisfied, Mayor Pro Tem Adams? Councilman Mundy, and I see you, Mr. Peel.
One of the things I want to clarify, you've said grant several times. This is not money that could be used in any other way for the city budget. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councilmember Mundy.
Okay, so and if that expense went away, that revenue would go away. So I just want to say that this is earmarked money, and we specifically asked for this money for this specific project. So we're not necessarily asking for new money, or we're not approving new money. Money is specifically earmarked for that. The other thing I would like to ask, and this doesn't necessarily impact my support of the project, but I don't see clear measurements built in to quantify that success. So I'd like to see that built in and to see what those are. What is the current rate of gunshot in this Cleveland in the 3-mile radius, and what should we expect to see? Is it a 10% decrease? Is it a 50% decrease? Just so that we have some clear goals, so that when we do evaluate this, we know if we've reached those goals, and it may be worthwhile putting city money into covering other areas that we can't get grant money to cover. And that's all I have.
I think Councilman Mundy has a point, and to his information, we always talk about the data. Mayor Pro Tem always mentions it. So if we can get that pulled together, and if this item passes committee, then we can have that item to the council members before we move to the full council for a vote. Councilwoman Scipio, then I'll move to Councilman McIntosh, and I see you too, Mr. Larson. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question to Assistant Chief Miles. Have we been using something similar to this in partnership with one of our other agencies?
We have a pilot program in place right now with Fusus Technology. Fusus Technology uses camera cores. They use a device called a core to integrate camera video footage. And right now we're partnering with Cleveland Avenue Homes and Salem Gardens and Farrell Court apartment complex to view their cameras as it relates to violent crime in those communities. We have been successful in doing that. We would, should we move forward with the real-time crime center, we would integrate those cameras into our real-time crime center. And there is a component in that that's built around community engagement, if approved, and we will work with the vendor to engage community and get the community involved from that aspect also.
Thank you.
Councilman McIntosh. You on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. I just want to point out that I view this as a very non-invasive technology. It's not like facial recognition or anything. It only comes into play when there is the identification of a gunshot. So to me, it is in the community, but does not generate any additional friction between between police department and the public. Also, I would think as going forward, if this works and we feel like we like it and want to expand it, I would imagine that we'd be building off a base and it would not cost us as much to cover twice that amount of area as it does to cover 1x of it.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Councilman Larson.
Yes, thank you. We were very excited, I think, last year when we learned that we got this grant or this funding available. And we've been talking about it ever since, about how this is going to improve our gun recognition problem that we have in the city. And finally, we're at the point where we're getting ready to implement it, and we've got a contract ready to go. And I'm very anxious to see us implement this. I would only comment that you know, guns that are used in one area of the town oftentimes show up in other areas of the town. And the fact that we can do recognition of where firearms are actively being used with some of the other devices that we have, we'll be able to, I think, be able to help lock in the other crimes that may occur outside of the zone that we're actually studying. So we're talking about technologies here, and the city is being very aggressive, and I applaud the police department for their efforts to use the state-of-the-art technology to do crime solving in this city, which we know is a problem, particularly dealing with firearms. And so we're going to have some other things tonight, I think, dealing with technologies, and we've got to be on top of that. And I applaud the effort that the police are doing to make sure that this city is staying abreast of current technologies to allow us to solve our problems.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to be heard on item C1? Seeing no one, I entertain a motion.
Move approval.
So moved by Vice Chair Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilwoman Burke. All in favor, we'll call the roll. Councilman Larson?
Yes.
Councilwoman Burke?
Yes.
Councilman Mundy?
Aye.
And that is a yes from me, so it is approved unanimously. We will now move to item C3, please, Madam Clerk.
Item C3, ordinance amending section 42-168 of the city code relating to curb loading zones in the East Ward.
I think Councilwoman Scipio asked for this item to be pulled. You have the floor, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like to have a review of that, of
Okay.
what this is about.
All right, Mr. DeCane is on the call. Mr. DeCane, you or our Ms. McCullough can take the item.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chairman Taylor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee, and members of the council. The item before you is a little deceptive. It talks about a curb loading zone. What actually is being proposed, that may have prompted the question, ma'am, is it's a people loading zone. We have two valet services that currently operate in the city. Well, we have valet service that operates at two locations, to be correct. One at the Cardinal and the other at the Indigo. The item before you tonight is an additional valet opportunity on Trade Street. It was brought forth by a local business down there. The valet service is proposed between daily 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's outside our parking enforcement hours, so there would be no impact to parking revenue. We don't have a valet in that section of downtown, and that sort of northern section of the city is growing. So staff does recommend approval. I will say that our experience with valet service in Winston-Salem has been a little bit rocky. It is a very desired service, which can have the detrimental effect of actually slowing traffic down instead of keeping people coming in and moving. So
Right.
Staff is sensitive to that, and we do address that when those issues come up. In general, valet has been successful. It has helped draw people downtown, and it has made it convenient for them to frequent our establishments. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Councilwoman Scipio.
Yes, this is on Trade Street, and it's going to be near, if you could give us a good location, I think it's right in front of Bimbo Beck Locksmiths, right up the street from it.
That's correct, ma'am. It is right there. In fact, King Classic Bakery, which tends to be an office favorite, is located there as well.
Okay. And I think it's also important that people know that the valet service will be leasing some spaces in our 6th and Trade Street deck. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
Okay. And, but I just, my biggest concern is that usually with valet service, cars get stacked up outside on the street. And this is Trade Street that's just 2 lanes. And so I think there's a potential problem that could happen if they don't have enough personnel to move the cars on a quick basis. But I think it's a very interesting concept. It gives us that big city feel in our small town of wonderful amenities.
Councilman Larson. Thank you, Ms. Scipio.
Yes, I think Councilmember Scipio makes an excellent point. It's that financially, this is probably going to prove out to be to our benefit, because you're going to get more money parking in a parking deck than you're going to get people putting quarters into machines. The only thing I would ask is, do we have a process of evaluating or renewal of these once they're granted? Is there a mechanism to receive complaints or receive a review of these permits once they're issued?
Mr. DeCane.
Councilmember Larson, so this is an ordinance change which allows it. Complaints would be routed through DOT just like they are now, or I stop on my way home like I do at the Cardinal to correct those issues. And it would be, so we're constantly reviewing them basically based off of the complaints received. If at any time we want to cease the service, we have the ability to do so. We would just amend the ordinance to take their name off of the approved list.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Mundy.
It sounded on paper like this was a partnership between the Italian restaurant and the valet, but this valet parking would be not necessarily just for restaurant patrons?
Good evening, Councilmember Mundy. That is correct. It's available to anyone. So if you wanted to come down and valet park and go to any other location downtown, you're more than welcome to do that. There's no commitment on behalf of those parking the cars that you frequent any particular establishment.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this item? We need a motion for item C3.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Larson.
Second.
Yeah, we go down the roll call now. Councilman Larson.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Councilwoman Burke.
Yes.
Councilman Mundy.
Aye.
And that is aye from me, so that is unanimous. That completes our consent agenda. Now we move to item G1 of the general agenda. Madam Clerk.
Item G1, consideration of items relating to the 2020 Strategies for Policing Innovation Grant.
I'd like to recognize Ms. Tasha Logan Ford.
Thank you again, Chair Taylor. Item G1, Chief Miles will provide the specifics of this item as well, but it's in regards to the 2020 Strategies for Policing Innovation Grant. This is a $700,000 grant that the city has been awarded to support establishing a real-time crime center. What we're looking to establish through the Real-Time Crime Center is really a way for us to integrate a variety of different technology platforms into one centralized area. The goal behind doing that is to provide better response time to our community, but also better situational awareness for our officers that are out in the field. A portion of one of the softwares associated with this center was approved as, in the past through our COVID-19 grant funds. There was 2 years of the Street Smart software that was approved. This is a 3-year grant through the Strategies and Policing grant to continue building out that center. There's already been a space identified to house this in the existing public safety center. The work would be folded into the existing renovation that's already underway. So with that, I would ask Chief Miles if she would provide the specifics of this grant, and we're happy to address any questions that council or committee may have.
Chief Miles, thank you, ma'am.
Again, Chairman Taylor and Mayor Pro Tem Adams and council members, committee members. The technology used in the Real-Time Crime Center will help improve missions outcome within the Winston-Salem Police Department. The mission of a Real-Time Crime Center would centralize a broad range of current and evolving technologies, coordinate sworn and non-sworn human resources, and direct the attention of both to high crime areas, active crime in progress, large-scale events, and etc. that might require law enforcement presence or response, and or high-profile or high recidivistic offenders in communities. Such efforts may allow law enforcement officers to respond quickly or even immediately to crimes in progress or to those that recently occurred. The technologies available allow us to be deliberate in our responses to violent crime because we know what we are responding to. We'll know what we're responding to in real time, and we are confident that it will improve community safety. As it relates to the street crimes technology, that technology will be deployed in officers' in-car computers, as well as in our real-time crime center. And just for an example, if officers are responding to a high crime area, and we know that a known offender may live in that area, that known offender's name will pop up on the officer's screen just to alert them of the violent offender that lives in that community and allow us to see what kind of violent crime happens in that community, and in hopes that we can better strategize in our response to deal with violent offenders and to assist victims in those particular areas.
Questions for Assistant Chief Miles? Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Yes, thank you, Assistant Chief Miles, Chair Taylor. Assistant Chief Miles or Ms. Logan Ford, is it possible that with all of these different initiatives in public safety that there, and you probably have it, but is there a plan, an actual visual plan of strategic of how all of these new technologies and things that we're doing are connected? Like, if you're doing this, how does the other two things on the agenda impact it and other things we have in place as to what we're expecting? Right now, it's like, I know we got a piece of equipment, but I don't even know how it connects to all the other things that we're doing in ensuring hopefully successful outcomes that include the safety of public safety officials as well as community. I also would like to know how the real-time center, if you remember, Councilmember Taylor, we came in thinking that we could change police answering every emergency call that wasn't their call, and firemen, that EMTs need to do their job. But would that also affect that on people calling in versus our fire department and police going to every emergency call that they receive? Thank you.
So Mayor Pro Tem Adams, there's not, I think, a succinct diagram of how all of these technologies interface. We conceptually talk about them. We know which pieces feed into the real-time crime center. But I think that's something that we could to work on and provide to show all the different pieces that are linked into the crime center. I also think that would be a good way for the public to understand how these different technologies interface between the gunshot detection system, the cameras feeding into it, and also what our officers are seeing and becoming aware of. So that's something we can work towards. This establishing the real-time crime center would not change the nature of the calls that we're responding to. The calls will still come in. We would still respond to the same types of calls. We're not recommending any changes to that at this point. I do think that there is an opportunity for us to have that conversation on a broader level based on an analysis that we're currently in the process of doing that's looking at the number of calls that are coming in, the type of calls, how many are violent crimes, how many are crimes that may involve individuals with mental health issues. So we actually are in the process of looking at that now so that we can try to quantify the amount of time that's spent on the different types of calls that we could provide some better information for council to consider in the future. But that process is not concluded just yet.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams, is the information you're requesting time sensitive, or can we give staff a little time to pull it all together?
Oh, definitely they can give us more time, because as we move forward, like we've seen, we're going to be adding different pieces to the strategy as we move forward. So if we can go ahead and start to just create the baseline of the process flow or the plan of what we got. Again, as elected officials, it's imperative that we know what we have, because now we're getting questions all the time, and we need to be prepared to answer those questions or be able to even tell citizens, if you go online to this such and such a link, you can click on it And you can see when we brought in this piece of equipment or process or technology and how all of it's connected in helping to do great community policing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chief Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, and Mayor Pro Tem Adams and members of the committee. I just want to ask Mayor Pro Tem Adams, would it be beneficial, we put together the flow chart, but would it be beneficial to have a PowerPoint actually showing you kind of, I guess, a picture of what the real-time crime center looks like, but also having the different systems that we're talking about, the different technology platforms that we're talking about, and how it integrates into the system? Would that?
Oh, definitely. And you know, I would be the first to say in the times that we are living in now, Chief, we are being held just like you all to another standard that we've never had before of transparency and being knowledgeable about what it is that the taxpayers are paying for. And in order for us to be able to continue to help convince them or help them to understand the importance of what the work is and what all it entails in today's time, we need to be better prepared to present any visual or anything education that we can do. So great. I think it's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Larson.
Yes, the word real-time center, I think the word is time in all of this. And if you want to look at the one thing that ties a lot of this together is how quickly can our police respond to a particular incident, whether it be gunshots, whether it be a call in for 911, and ultimately how quickly they can respond is the efficiency which we grade them on. There's nothing more frustrating than somebody breaking into your house and then it takes 15 minutes for police to show up. So, you know, if you're looking for a common denominator, what I'm looking for is using technology in the most progressive and aggressive way to solve the problem of quick response time for the citizens of this city. And I think the things that's tying us all together here on these, where the next one we're going to look at as well, is how quickly we can implement this technology to the benefits of crime solution in the city. And I would also add that most of it, remarkably, is due to the good efforts of grantsmanship out of the police department to generate funding outside of our normal operating budget to do some of these exploratory programs to prove their worth. And I would agree with Councilmember Monday, is we do need to quantify results, but I think those will be forthcoming as we see these things come online. I'm very anxious to see them being actually used and show the profitability of implementing them, maybe even on a broader scale.
Thank you, Councilman Larson. That's actually an excellent segment. Councilman Mundy.
That's exactly what I was going to just add is let's have these the data that can analyze the success. So much of the criticism I think that we're getting from you know, a small group of the public is anecdotal, and I just always feel better when I have numbers that back up my success story. And the flip side is that if it's not successful, we need to know that as well and take a different tack.
Thank you, sir. This is actually an action request item that requires a vote. So what I'd like to do is get a motion on the floor and to see if there's any further discussion that needs to be had after that. So is there a motion to approve this item?
Motion to approve.
Councilwoman Burke, is there a second?
Second.
We'll move to the roll call. Councilman Larson.
Yes.
Councilwoman Burke.
Yes.
Councilman Mundy.
Aye.
And that is a yes from me. So item G1 is approved unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk, we'll move to item G2, please.
Item G2, resolution awarding purchase order for LexisNexis online citizen reporting system.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is an item that was actually discussed very briefly in finance, and we moved it to public safety because we wanted to sort of keep all the public safety items in one place. And as Mayor Pro Tem Adams asked for, to talk about how they all are intertwined and can be related to the safety of the citizens. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Logan Ford and to give us a brief overview, and then we'll move to the rest of the public safety staff.
Absolutely. Chair Taylor, this online reporting system is, again, a project that's being funded through COVID coronavirus emergency supplemental funding. This will be an online reporting system that would allow citizens to seek assistance from the police department without us having sent an officer for specific instances. For instance, if something minor, a cell phone may be stolen and you wanted to create a report, you could be able to do that through an online portal. So I'll ask Chief Miles again if she would explain the details of this project and how it ties in with our overall strategy to improve our response and customer service to our citizens.
Right.
Hi, again, Chairman Taylor, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and committee members. As mentioned, the LexisNexis system will allow citizens to self-report, immediate access to reporting non-emergency calls for service, negating the need to wait for an officer if they choose to do so. Some of the call types includes loss of personal property, larceny of goods from retail establishments where no suspect information is available, loss of license plates, etc. It's very user-friendly. We know now that some citizens call the police and they have to wait sometimes quite a while on an officer to respond, but this will certainly minimize the wait time and give them the advantage of having information that they may need immediately. For instance, oftentimes if a person loses their cell phone, the insurance company is wanting to know a report number. And so that's something that they can generate immediately, have some brief details, and use that to file that claim with that insurance company.
Questions for Chief Miles? And I'd like to point out, once again, we're talking the amount of $49,560 paid for by grant funding. And if you'll notice, the resounding theme over the last three items is they're all paid for through grant funding. So Councilman Mundy, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Does the grant allow any money for communicating this to the general public? Because this is a great time saver for everyone. It's a win-win. I just want to make sure that word gets out there.
Right now,
go ahead, Chief Miles.
Right now, the grant doesn't allocate funding for notifying the public, but we won't have any issue doing that. We'll work with city marketing to push out information on all of these systems, and so that the public is fully aware of what our intentions are.
And Councilman Mundy, being on the committee, we have a wonderful marketing and communication staff. If you have any ideas on how we can best do that, we're happy to have your input, and we'll try to do what we can to get the word out. Excellent point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else wishes to be heard on this item? This is way quicker than I expected, so we'll move to vote. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion for approval.
Motion by Councilwoman Burke. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Mundy, discussion. All in favor? We'll go to the roll call. Councilman Larson.
Yes.
Councilman Mundy.
Aye.
Councilwoman Burke.
Yes.
And that is a yes from me. So item G2 is approved unanimously as well. That concludes both the consent and general agenda items. I just want the council and the committee to know there have been several discussions had in the community and on the council and in the public comment level from Triad Abolition Project and several other groups. So I just want you to know that in January, we look to have a conversation about the omnibus and their fire department report, benchmarking on police mental health response units and several other items of key interest. So I don't want you to think that when people come to us, their concerns have fallen on deaf ears. We will hear them in January, but if anybody wishes to be updated in between time, in the meantime, we'll definitely get that to you. Members of the council and committee, is there anything else that should be considered for the good of the order? Seeing nothing further, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night.